she married a man with nothing but the clothes on his back. And on the night she gave birth to triplets, she found his face splashed across national headlines as a vanished tech millionaire. This is the story of Evelyn Hart, a woman who chose kindness over caution, love over logic, and Caleb Thorne, the man whose secrets could have shattered everything they built, but might just save it. Before we dive into this extraordinary journey of love, betrayal, and redemption, ask yourself, can the truth heal what deception nearly destroyed? Hello, my beautiful and wonderful family. Without wasting time, let's begin this beautiful story. The hum of fluorescent lights faded into the background as Evelyn Hart stood motionless in the hospital corridor, her gaze locked on the front page of the newspaper someone had left on the waiting bench. Her hands trembled, fingertips damp with disbelief. The headline seared itself into her thoughts. Tech visionary resurfaces. Caleb Thorne leads revolutionary cybersecurity revival. The man in the photo wore a sleek suit, a polished watch glinting beneath the cuff of his crisp shirt. His smile was confident, understated, a far cry from the quiet man who had spent nights curled next to her on a lumpy mattress in their attic flat. Her eyes darted to the caption beneath the image, and her heart constricted. Thorne, the elusive founder of Thorne Dynamics, reemerges after a mysterious 5-year absence. Sources close to the executive say his return signals a new era in digital defense. The page crinkled as her grip tightened. She hadn't even known his last name when they met. Not really. He'd told her just enough to gain her trust, never enough to give her the whole truth. A nurse passing by slowed, her face soft with concern. "Mrs. Hart, are you all right?" Evelyn couldn't summon a proper reply. Her voice rasped low and uncertain. "Is this really him?" The nurse followed her eyes to the headline but said nothing. What could she possibly offer? No medical chart could diagnose the feeling flooding Evelyn's chest. Heartache, betrayal, awe, maybe all at once. Hours earlier, Evelyn had been sitting in the neonatal intensive care unit, gently stroking the plastic incubator that housed one of her daughters. The soft hum of machines, the flickering blue monitors, the rhythmic hiss of oxygen tubes. They were the soundtrack to her prayers. Caleb had been by her side then, whispering that everything would be all right, that their daughters would grow strong, and that he'd be there through it all. And now this. She slowly sank into the nearest chair. Her mind raced through a year of memories, Caleb fixing broken lights in their attic room, working odd jobs, always careful never to speak of his past. The man who'd proposed with a handmade ring in the rain. He was the same man smiling from this newspaper, surrounded by tech analysts and economic forecasts. He'd let her fall in love with a man he had only half revealed. The door to the NICU slid open with a soft whir. Caleb stepped out, eyes weary but calm. He walked toward her, unaware that his entire mask had just been torn away. Evelyn rose, gripping the paper like evidence at a trial. "Is this you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Caleb froze. The moment his eyes dropped to the headline, Evelyn saw the flicker of recognition. Not just of the words, but of inevitability. The truth had caught up to him. He looked up slowly. "Evelyn, is this you?" she repeated, louder this time. A mother on the edge of rage, confusion, and postpartum fragility. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward gently, hands raised not in defense, but surrender. "I wanted to tell you. I tried, but I didn't know how to say it without losing everything." "Everything?" she echoed bitterly. "You mean me? Our children?" "No," he replied quickly. "I mean the peace, the silence, the small sacred life we built away from all that." He gestured toward the paper, the polished persona, the world he had buried. Evelyn blinked back tears. "You let me believe you were homeless. You let me bring you food, offer you a place to stay. You let me carry you into my life without ever once telling me who I was really carrying. I never lied about my love for you, but you lied about who you were." His face crumpled slightly at her words. For once, the calm mask he wore with such grace faltered. "I wasn't hiding you from the truth, Evelyn. I was hiding the truth from myself," he said. "I was running, from betrayal, from shame, from a world that tried to destroy me." The rage inside her flared, but it collided with something deeper. Grief. Grief for the intimacy they had shared, now shadowed by omissions. Grief for the trust that had been cracked in a moment by a headline. Grief for the simplicity she now realized had never been real. "You should have trusted me," she said, her voice softer now but still sharp. "We made vows, Caleb. We created life together. I let you see me at my most vulnerable. And I never asked for perfection, just honesty. He nodded, eyes damp. I know, and I'll carry that mistake for the rest of my life. But I will do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. Every single day. They stood in silence as a lullaby played faintly from a NICU room. Caleb stepped forward, gently placing his hand on hers. She didn't pull away, but she didn't clasp it either. Please, he whispered, come sit. Let me explain everything. They sat in the family waiting lounge, the newspaper folded between them like a fragile ceasefire. Evelyn listened as Caleb peeled back years of silence. He spoke of betrayal, of a partner who stole his company, drained his accounts, and ruined his reputation. He described the decision to disappear, to start over with nothing, to feel again what it meant to live life from the bottom. A man who had once spoken on world stages had slept in shelters and wandered side streets with nothing but a worn backpack. I didn't choose poverty, he said. I chose escape. Evelyn looked at him long and hard. And what did you choose when you met me? Caleb's voice trembled. Hope. Her eyes welled again, not from pity, but from the weight of it all. There was love still, somewhere inside the whirlwind of questions, but it was buried beneath layers of hurt. I need time, she finally said. Not for the babies, not for us, for me. To figure out how to trust what I know of you now. He nodded, gently releasing her hand. You'll have it, he replied. All the time you need, and all the truth you deserve. As he stood to leave, Evelyn called out softly. One more thing. He turned. I don't regret falling for the man you were with me. I just wish I knew he was only half the man you truly are. Her voice didn't shake. It held, and that, more than anything, told him that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. Not a perfect new beginning, but a possible one. It was the kind of rain that didn't just fall, it clung. It soaked your collar, your spirit, your thoughts. Evelyn Hart's shoes were already squelching as she made her way home from her late shift at the community shelter. The night felt especially cruel, wind cutting like a warning. She held her coat tighter, dodging puddles while her mind wandered to the morning roster at the hospital. That was when she saw him. A lone figure, crouched beneath the narrow awning of a long-shuttered hardware store. The dim streetlight overhead flickered, casting a muted glow on a man wrapped in a patchwork of clothing. His posture was rigid, his knees drawn to his chest. Next to him, a battered backpack sat as though it guarded his life's only possessions. Evelyn didn't break stride at first. She had passed dozens of people like him before. City corners had no shortage of broken men and forgotten stories. But there was something about his stillness. Not laziness or despair, but restraint, as if movement might break him further. She slowed. Something in his gaze stopped her cold. His eyes, a steel gray laced with something unreadable, weren't pleading or vacant. They were waiting, not for help necessarily, but for recognition. She stepped forward gently. Hey, she said, trying to sound casual, non-threatening. You okay? He didn't answer right away. Then his voice, low and worn, responded, I'm fine. She smiled softly, trying to warm the air between them. You don't look fine. A long silence stretched, the only sound the rain tapping the rusted metal above them. He finally shifted slightly. Just cold, he said. That's all. It wasn't all. She could see that. His coat was threadbare, his shoes mismatched. Yet there was a tension in his jaw, a refusal to collapse. He wasn't ready to be saved. Just acknowledged. You hungry? She asked. Again, a pause, then a subtle nod. Evelyn motioned toward the neon sign across the street, a small 24-hour diner, half empty and always serving. Come on, she said, already stepping into the rain again. He hesitated, then gathered his backpack with surprising care and followed her. They sat in a corner booth, tucked beneath a humming vent. Evelyn ordered him a ham sandwich and coffee. He didn't look at the menu. His eyes never really left hers. Thank you, he said when the food arrived. It wasn't just manners. It sounded like it had been pulled from somewhere deep inside. I'm Evelyn, she offered, wiping rain off her cheeks. He nodded, chewing slowly, as if trying to savor more than just the food. Then he replied, Caleb. Just Caleb. No last name, no history. Their conversation was simple. She asked light questions, nothing probing. He answered in phrases, never too much, never too personal. But she noticed things. The way he stirred his coffee counterclockwise, his fingers trembling just slightly. The way he glanced out the window every few seconds, like he half expected someone to follow him. "Where are you from?" she asked softly. Caleb looked down. "Nowhere worth mentioning." That silence should have ended the conversation, but it didn't. She didn't push. Instead, she took a sip of her tea and said, "Well, I'm from everywhere worth forgetting." That made him smile. She didn't know then how many nights they'd share tea in silence, or how his quiet, watchful presence would become her comfort. But in that moment, something shifted. As they left the diner, Caleb nodded toward the bus shelter near the corner. "I usually sleep there," he murmured. She paused, then reached into her tote and handed him a folded blanket from the shelter's stockpile, an extra one she always kept with her just in case. He hesitated, then took it. "You really do this often? Feed strangers?" "Only the ones who don't ask," she said with a soft grin. That was the first night. The days that followed stitched themselves into a quiet rhythm. Evelyn would find him fixing something, an old radio at the shelter, a leaking pipe in the basement, a broken wheel on a shopping cart. He was useful, reliable, silent. Staff began to refer to him with a kind of respectful curiosity. They knew nothing about him, yet no one dared push too hard. Evelyn brought him lunch most days. She told herself it was habit, compassion, professional courtesy. But when he waited for her outside the bakery next to the hospital one morning, balancing 2 styrofoam cups of coffee and a crooked smile, she knew it had become something else. "Peace offering," he said, handing her the cup. "For what?" "For not saying more." She sipped. Sometimes silence says the most. From that day on, they shared breakfast more often than not, on benches, in corners, anywhere that offered even a hint of privacy from a world that never stopped moving. Caleb never asked for anything, never crossed a line. But his presence filled the gaps in Evelyn's life she didn't know she had. She had dated before. Ambitious men, loud men, men who measured her worth by how quickly she could shrink herself into their schedules. But Caleb, he gave space. Space to talk or not, to exist or breathe or cry, without expectation. One rainy afternoon, as they sat in the community center folding clothes for a donation drive, Evelyn caught him staring out the window again. "What do you see when you look out there?" she asked. He looked at her instead. "The life I ran from. You don't talk much about that." "There's not much to say. I think there is." He folded another shirt, neatly, almost obsessively. "Everyone has things they're not ready to remember," he said finally. "But I remember you walking up to me like I was someone. That matters." Her chest tightened. It was the closest he'd come to opening up. "I didn't walk up to someone," she said gently. "I walked up to you." His eyes didn't waver this time. "That's what scares me." Over the next few weeks, the city's harsh edges softened. Caleb began helping fix old computers in the shelter's tech room. A few residents recognized his knack for coding and hardware, but none asked why a man so skilled was sleeping in a basement closet. Evelyn noticed how he avoided direct praise, how he always slipped away just before someone asked a question too pointed. Still, he began spending more time with her. They'd eat dinner in her attic studio above the bakery, sharing rice and lentils or cheap takeout. He never stayed over, but sometimes fell asleep on the couch when they talked too long about nothing. It was Maya Brooks, Evelyn's colleague and closest confidante, who raised the first red flag. "You're falling for him," Maya said one morning as they folded hospital linens. Evelyn tried to deflect. "He's just kind. Kind can still lie," Maya warned. "You don't know anything about him." "I know enough," Evelyn said quietly. "He's never tried to be anything he's not." Maya frowned. Maybe that's the problem. Evelyn didn't argue, but later that night, when Caleb arrived with a broken toaster and a sheepish grin, she felt her heart tug in directions logic couldn't follow. One evening, as the sky blushed with dusk, Caleb stood at her door holding a ring. It wasn't gold or silver, just a twist of copper wire shaped with care. "It's not much," he said, "but it's mine." Her breath caught. "I don't need more," she whispered. In the heart of the city, beneath strings of dim fairy lights and a sky heavy with forgotten stars, Evelyn said yes to a man who had told her everything, except who he really was. From the outside, it didn't look like much, just a narrow attic apartment tucked above an old bakery with squeaky floorboards, thin walls, and windows that always fogged up in winter. But to Evelyn, that space became the tender soil where love quietly bloomed. After Caleb's simple proposal with the twisted copper ring, things didn't change drastically. He still helped at the shelter during the day. She still worked long shifts at the hospital, comforting frightened patients and answering midnight calls. But each evening, as she climbed the back staircase to their apartment, she knew he would be there, usually barefoot, wiping his hands with a rag after tinkering with some appliance that didn't need fixing. They lived simply. The only furniture they had was what Evelyn inherited from an older nurse who had moved into assisted living: a love seat with frayed arms, a chipped coffee table, and a creaky iron frame bed that wheezed whenever they lay too close. But they made it theirs, draping old scarves across the windows, lighting candles in empty soup cans, laughing over meals that rarely cost more than a few dollars. Caleb was never loud about his affection. He never shouted grand declarations or scripted romantic speeches, but he had a way of watching Evelyn as though she was the last calm harbor in a turbulent world. He would reach for her hand without speaking, stroke her hair when she fell asleep during movie nights, and warm up tea during her late shifts without being asked. One evening, Evelyn came home soaked from an unexpected downpour. Her umbrella had flipped inside out in the wind, and her scrubs clung to her like second skin. She was grumbling when she walked in, but Caleb didn't say a word. He took her coat, grabbed a towel, and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. Then he kneeled to unlace her wet shoes. "I could have done that," she said, half laughing, half flustered. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." It was moments like those, quiet, consistent, thoughtful, that built the kind of love that doesn't announce itself but simply settles in your bones. They created little rituals. Sunday mornings meant black coffee and crossword puzzles they never finished. Thursdays were spaghetti nights, which often ended with them dancing barefoot in the kitchen to music playing softly from Caleb's old speaker. And when Evelyn came home from especially rough shifts, Caleb would set out their mismatched teacups and sit with her in silence, offering his presence like a salve. Still, Caleb remained careful. There were things he wouldn't talk about: his childhood, past relationships, or where he learned how to code the way he did. Evelyn tried once or twice to press him, but he'd gently deflect, kissing her forehead and changing the subject with a soft, "not tonight." She let it go. For a while. One afternoon she returned from the hospital to find their tiny apartment filled with the smell of baked cinnamon. Caleb had tried to make her mother's bread pudding recipe, a dish she had only mentioned in passing weeks ago. "It's probably awful," he said, wiping flour from his cheek. Evelyn tasted it and laughed. "It's not awful," she said. "It's terrible. But it's perfect." They sat on the floor that evening, legs tangled, sharing burnt pudding and stories about nothing. At one point, Evelyn leaned back and looked at him seriously. "You make it really hard not to fall for you." Caleb looked down, suddenly vulnerable. "That's not my goal." She tilted her head. "What is?" He hesitated. "To not hurt you." It was the closest he had ever come to saying "I love you." Her friends had mixed reactions. Maya, always outspoken, never softened her stance. "Evelyn, he's lovely, but you don't know him. You know what he does, not where he's been. That's dangerous." "I know who he is with me," Evelyn said, unwilling to argue. "Is that enough?" Evelyn wanted to say yes. She needed it to be yes. The wedding was spontaneous, just the way Caleb liked things. They didn't have money for fanfare, but neither of them wanted to wait. It was Evelyn's idea to hold it at the community center. They strung up paper lanterns, borrowed folding chairs, and served lemonade in recycled jars. Maya officiated, though she made Caleb promise he'd never disappear without leaving a note again. Evelyn wore a second-hand white dress with lace sleeves that fluttered when she moved. Caleb wore a clean shirt and the same scuffed boots he'd had since she met him. "I don't need perfection," she told him as they stood hand in hand. "I need truth and loyalty. I'll give you all three," he promised, "even if I fumbled the order." When they kissed, the crowd of friends from the shelter, hospital, and neighborhood burst into cheers. Someone popped a balloon by accident, and Caleb laughed so hard he nearly dropped the cupcake they used instead of a wedding cake. That night they returned to the attic with 2 paper bags of leftover food, a bouquet of daisies tied with twine, and nothing else but each other. It was enough. In the weeks that followed, life carried on much the same, except now there was a new ring on Evelyn's finger and a deeper quiet in Caleb's moments of solitude. He still never talked about his past, but Evelyn began to notice patterns. He'd flinch slightly at the sound of certain words: corporate, investor, patent. When an ad for a tech conference played during a television commercial, he changed the channel too quickly. Once, when Evelyn caught him reading a complicated article about data encryption, She raised an eyebrow. Just curiosity. He shrugged. Caleb, she began. He didn't let her finish. Don't ask me for a truth I'm not ready to give. It hurt, but she nodded. I'll wait, she said. Then came the night she sat on their creaky bed, feeling dizzy and short of breath. Caleb rushed to her side, his hands fluttering awkwardly around her shoulders. You okay? I think so, she whispered, but something was off. The next morning she called in sick and went to the hospital where she worked. The tests came back faster than she expected. She was pregnant. She stared at the words on the paper for a full minute before she moved. She wasn't afraid, just stunned. She had wanted children someday, but now that someday had arrived with a heartbeat and a timeline, she told Caleb that evening. He didn't panic. He didn't retreat. He wrapped her in his arms, forehead resting against hers. We'll be okay, he said. You think? He pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. I know. A week later, they had their first ultrasound. Evelyn lay on the crisp white table, her fingers clutched around Caleb's. When the technician widened her eyes and adjusted the probe, Evelyn's stomach twisted. What is it? She asked. The technician smiled. I'm hearing 3 heartbeats. Evelyn blinked. 3? Caleb's mouth parted, but no words came. You're having triplets, the technician confirmed. Shock melted into laughter, then into tears. Caleb kissed her knuckles. 3. Of course, we'd never do anything halfway, but in the days that followed, something shifted in Caleb. He began leaving earlier and returning later. He brushed off questions with charm, but lacked detail. There were nights when Evelyn sat on the bed, rubbing her belly, wondering if the man she loved was slipping away in slow motion. She didn't know what was changing. She only knew that something was. Pregnancy brought Evelyn a whirlwind of emotions, joy, fear, anticipation, but more than anything, it brought a new kind of stillness, a deep, reflective pause. Life was no longer just about long hospital shifts or evenings in the attic. It was about nurturing something unknown, mysterious, and already adored. For Caleb, the news of the triplets became both a miracle and a mirror. It lit up a part of him she had never seen before, a fierce, almost desperate desire to protect. But it also revealed cracks. He became more alert, more guarded. He listened carefully to every word the doctor said, took meticulous notes, and stayed up at night researching things Evelyn didn't even know how to pronounce. Their attic apartment turned into a chaotic blend of hope and preparation. Evelyn taped ultrasound images to the fridge. Caleb scribbled lists on scrap paper, crib dimensions, prenatal vitamins, names he never shared with her. The floor was often cluttered with hand-me-down baby clothes donated by the women at the hospital. Caleb folded each one with almost ceremonial precision. Despite their excitement, Evelyn couldn't shake the unease that began to nest in her chest. It started small. Caleb would disappear for hours, always with a vague excuse, running errands, checking out second-hand stores for baby supplies, picking up groceries. But then she began noticing other things. Groceries that didn't come in bags from the corner store anymore. Vitamins in shiny, expensive packaging. Medical bills that should have drained their savings were suddenly covered in full. The creaky apartment got a new water heater installed, quietly, efficiently, without ever showing up on a receipt. One night, while organizing receipts for her hospital's tax reimbursement program, Evelyn opened their joint bank account and froze. A deposit had appeared, anonymously labeled, substantial, enough to cover a year's rent in advance. Her pulse quickened. When she asked Caleb about it later, he simply smiled. Freelance work, he said. A guy I met needed help with his system's encryption. It paid better than expected, but since when do you do freelance? He shrugged, eyes avoiding hers. It's not a big deal. Evelyn stared at him for a long time. Is there anything you want to tell me, Caleb? He leaned forward and kissed her hand. Just that we're going to be fine. You don't need to worry. But she was worried. Not because of the money, but because of the look in his eyes. It wasn't just reassurance. It was restraint. A secret pressing against the edges of their life, begging not to be named. As Evelyn's belly grew, so did her sense of isolation. She felt her body change in ways she hadn't expected. The stretch of her skin, the heaviness in her limbs, the strange hunger. That came at 3 a.m. Caleb remained attentive. He massaged her back, brewed herbal teas, ran warm baths. But emotionally, he seemed farther than ever. She would catch him staring out the window for long stretches. Once she found him scribbling on the back of an envelope, strings of numbers and diagrams she couldn't decipher. When he noticed her watching, he quickly folded it and slipped it into his pocket. "I miss us," she whispered one night as they lay in bed. Caleb turned toward her, brushing her hair back. "I'm right here." "But not all of you." He didn't reply. He just pulled her closer, held her like something fragile, and pressed his lips against her forehead. The silence between them stretched thin. Maya noticed it too. "He's distracted," she said one afternoon during a prenatal yoga class they attended together. "He's preparing," Evelyn replied. "There's preparing, and then there's hiding." Evelyn didn't argue, because part of her feared Maya was right. The baby shower was modest but beautiful. The community center was filled with balloons and soft pastels, homemade decorations and rows of finger food. Evelyn wore a flowing dress that did little to hide the enormity of her bump. Caleb stayed close by, his hand always hovering near her elbow, steadying her as if the weight of 3 lives might tip her over. Guests gifted tiny onesies, burp cloths, and books with handwritten notes. One elderly nurse handed them a music box that played a lullaby Evelyn recognized from her childhood. She nearly cried. As she sat down to rest, a woman she didn't know approached. "You're lucky," the woman said with a warm smile. "Men like him don't come around often. I saw him last week helping load donations for the Single Mothers Fund. Did it without asking for credit." Evelyn nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, her thoughts churned. Caleb was always giving, always helping, but who had helped him? And what had he left behind to become the man standing beside her now? Then came the day of the unexpected appointment. Evelyn had been feeling sharp back pain and an unusual tightness in her chest. Her obstetrician ordered an emergency ultrasound. Caleb met her at the hospital, face pale but composed. Everything seemed fine until the technician paused. "There's a fluctuation in the middle heartbeat," she said calmly. "Not dangerous yet, but we'll need closer monitoring." Evelyn's heart dropped. Caleb gripped her hand tighter. "We're going to get through this," he said. She nodded, her eyes locked on the screen. The monitor showed 3 pulses, tiny, rhythmic blinks of life. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. When they returned home, Evelyn sat by the window, rubbing the underside of her belly. "I don't want them to suffer," she whispered. "They won't," Caleb replied, placing his hand beside hers. "But if anything happens—" "Nothing will," he interrupted gently. "I won't let it." That was when Evelyn looked up, eyes steady. "You keep saying that, like you control everything. Caleb, are you hiding something from me?" He didn't answer right away, just looked out the window. Finally he said, "I'll tell you everything, just not yet." Her heart ached. "Then when? When they're here, when they're safe?" She wanted to press him further, but the exhaustion in his voice stopped her. He wasn't avoiding her to deceive. He was bracing for something. Weeks passed, each day heavier than the last. Caleb became more resourceful. Their apartment transformed, walls painted, furniture upgraded, a crib set assembled with quiet urgency. Evelyn was grateful, yet unsettled. She felt like she was living with 2 versions of the same man, one who kissed her belly and whispered bedtime stories to their daughters, and another who vanished into the night, returning with solutions he never explained. Then, one rainy afternoon, her water broke, too early. She was rushed to Cedar Grove Medical Center. Doctors flooded the room with concern. Technicians called for additional scans, and Caleb paced like a man who had spent his whole life waiting for this moment and yet wasn't ready. Labor came quickly. Pain tore through Evelyn in waves. She gripped the bed rails, biting down screams. Caleb held her hand, whispered through clenched teeth. "You're strong," he said. "You've got this. I'm right here." Hours blurred. Then, one by one, their daughters arrived, tiny, pink, crying. A chorus of life in a room filled with noise and relief. Evelyn wept. But as they wheeled her into recovery, something changed in Caleb. He turned from the nurses, took a long breath, and his expression darkened, not with fear, but with resolve. He turned to her, lips pressed together. "I need to tell you something," he said. The recovery room was quiet, too quiet. Evelyn lay still, her arms wrapped protectively over her abdomen, though her daughters were no longer inside her. The echoes of her labor still throbbed in her bones. 3 cries had filled the operating room only hours ago, tiny, fierce fighting sounds that had made the pain worth it. Now they were in the neonatal unit, surrounded by blinking machines and soft alarms. She wanted to be with them, but her body was heavy, weighted not just with fatigue, but with anticipation. Caleb hadn't spoken a word since they wheeled her into post-op. He sat in the corner, hunched over, elbows on his knees, gaze fixed on the speckled tile floor. She could feel it before he even opened his mouth. A secret was coming. "Evelyn," he said quietly, not lifting his eyes. "I need to talk to you." She didn't respond, just waited. Caleb finally looked up. "There's something I should have told you before all this. I kept it buried because I thought I could outrun it. I was wrong." A beat passed. "I wasn't always homeless," he began. "And I didn't just lose a job. I walked away from an entire world." Evelyn's breath caught. "My name is Caleb Thorne," he continued, voice trembling but steady. "I used to run a cybersecurity firm, Thorne Dynamics. I founded it in my 20s. It grew fast, too fast." He paused to gauge her reaction. She didn't blink. She just stared. "My partner, Gideon, he wasn't who I thought he was. He manipulated contracts behind my back, got investors to sign off on restructuring without my consent. One day I came in to find my credentials revoked and my stake dissolved. Overnight, everything I built was taken, legally, but not honorably." Evelyn sat up, her heart pounding now, not from pain but betrayal. "You were the CEO?" she whispered. "I was the architect, the founder, the one who coded every security protocol from scratch. And when they took it from me, I didn't just lose the company. I lost faith in everything. I had no fight left. So I vanished." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why hide from it? From me?" "I wasn't running from the business," Caleb said. "I was running from what it made me. I let my guard down once, and it destroyed everything. I couldn't face the pity, the headlines, the people who'd once looked up to me. I became someone else, someone no one would recognize." Evelyn's mouth felt dry. "You let me believe you were broken. You let me fall in love with a man who had nothing, and all this time I was trying to find out if someone could love me without any of the titles, without the money, without the past." Tears welled in her eyes, not out of heartbreak, but disbelief. "I gave you my soul," she said, voice soft and shaking. "And you gave me pieces of yours, enough to make me believe I knew the whole, but it was only half." "I know," Caleb said, standing slowly, "and I've hated myself for it every day." She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the ceiling now, the fluorescent light overhead blurring into a smear of white. "You should have told me when I got pregnant." "I tried," he said, "but every time I looked at you, I saw peace, and I couldn't bring myself to tear it down." "Peace isn't silence, Caleb. It's truth. You robbed me of choice." He dropped to his knees beside her bed. "I was terrified that if I told you who I was, you'd see me as just another man who built his life on control and ego. I needed you to love the man I became, not the one I used to be." "I loved both," she whispered. "I just didn't know it." They sat in silence, the beeping of distant machines the only sound between them. "I'm sorry," Caleb murmured. "I know," she said, though it didn't ease the weight in her chest. "But sorry isn't enough right now." He nodded slowly, rising to his feet. "Then I'll do more than say it. I'll prove it." Hours later, Evelyn was wheeled into the NICU. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of monitors and the shimmer of IV drips. Her daughters lay in 3 separate bassinets, tiny and fragile, but alive. She touched the glass on each incubator. "They deserve truth," she whispered. Caleb stood behind her, hands clenched. "Then I'll start today. No more silence, no more hiding." The next morning, Evelyn awoke to find Caleb gone. Her heart tightened in panic, but then she saw the note on the table. "Meeting a lawyer. I need to fix this from the inside out. I'll be back, always." He returned late that evening, face drained, shirt wrinkled, but eyes lit with a strange fire she hadn't seen since their wedding. "I'm not running anymore," he said. "If Gideon wants a fight, I'll give him one, but on my terms." She said nothing, just reached out and held his hand. Days passed. Evelyn split her time between the NICU and the quiet corners of the hospital lounge. Maya visited often, bringing her snacks and firm wisdom. "You okay?" she asked one afternoon. "No," Evelyn said, "but I will be. That's all that matters." Back at home, Caleb began making changes. He revived his old email accounts, contacted former advisors, and began assembling documents, receipts, source code files, timelines. His fingers danced across his keyboard like a man remembering who he used to be. Evelyn watched him from the doorway one night, their apartment dim except for the laptop's glow. "You never stopped being that man," she said. Caleb looked up, eyes full of emotion. "I forgot who he was." She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. "Then let's remind him." The weeks that followed Caleb's confession were thick with silence, not the cold kind that pushed people apart, but the delicate, uncertain kind that asked for space to breathe. Evelyn remained calm on the surface, but inside, she was unraveling in a new WOY. The hospital had become her second skin, its long corridors, the beeping monitors, the rhythm of machines that fed and oxygenated her daughters. Every day, she sat beside 3 tiny bodies wrapped in tubes and blankets, whispering stories, singing songs, placing her fingers gently through the incubator openings to feel the faint squeeze of impossibly small hands. Caleb came and went, often with folders tucked under his arm, his mind occupied with more than feedings and discharge charts. He had begun tracking down contacts, securing statements, building a case, one that would not only reclaim his name but also shield their children from the storm approaching. Gideon Langston, his former partner, had re-emerged through legal filings and press leaks. A calculated series of claims had been lodged, false allegations of stolen code, financial mismanagement, and breach of non-compete clauses. Within days, tabloids had started churning out speculation. One morning, while Evelyn spooned lukewarm oatmeal into her mouth at the hospital cafeteria, she noticed a woman staring at her from across the room. At first, she ignored it, until the woman's phone screen tilted just enough to reveal Evelyn's own photograph on a gossip blog. The headline was, "Cruel, Reclusive Tech Genius's Secret Wife, From Rags to Royalty." Evelyn's stomach twisted. She abandoned the tray, heart racing, as whispers began to rise from nearby tables. Back home, she slammed the front door behind her. Caleb was hunched over his laptop, papers spread out like a chessboard of war plans. "Did you know about that?" she demanded. He looked up, confused. "What?" "They're dragging my name through the mud now. My face, Caleb." His jaw tightened. "I didn't think it would reach you that fast. I work in a hospital. I can't be some tabloid fantasy. This isn't just your past anymore. It's mine." He stood slowly, but she stepped back. "I supported you through your silence, through your secrets. But now I'm the collateral?" "No," he said, voice sharp. "You're the reason I'm fighting, but I can't make it disappear overnight." She shook her head, eyes burning. "I asked you to be honest, not to pull me into a world I never agreed to enter. Do you regret it?" he asked, softer now. Evelyn didn't answer right away. Her silence wasn't rejection. It was a battle cry held in suspension. "I regret the lies," she finally said, "but I don't regret us." That night, she called Maya. They sat on the rooftop of Maya's apartment building, sharing hot tea in mismatched mugs, the city below buzzing quietly. "I don't know how to feel," Evelyn admitted. "I'm grateful for the love, but I feel betrayed by the omissions." Maya nodded slowly. "It's not easy to love someone who's still healing, but it's even harder to love someone who won't let you in. I thought I was strong enough to handle anything." "You are," Maya said, "but strength doesn't mean you carry everything in silence." Evelyn sighed. "I want to forgive him. I just don't know if I trust him yet." "Then don't rush it. Forgiveness is a journey. And trust, that's rebuilt one truth at a time." Back at the apartment, Caleb was sitting alone in the dark, eyes on the ceiling, knees drawn up to his chest. When Evelyn returned, he didn't say a word. He just looked at her like a man waiting for a verdict. "I spoke to Maya," she said, setting her bag down. "She told me something that finally made sense." "What?" "That I don't have to choose between love and boundaries." Caleb looked down. "I wouldn't blame you if you walked away." She crossed the room slowly and sat beside him. "I'm not walking away, but I am asking for the truth moving forward. No more later, no more disappearing. You don't protect me by keeping me in the dark. You leave me stranded." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Then no more dark. I promise." The next few days were quiet but different. Caleb updated her on everything. Calls with legal teams, email threads, financial audits he was reopening. He began showing her documents, explaining who Gideon really was and how the betrayal unfolded. It wasn't just a business rivalry. It had been a calculated dismantling of everything Caleb believed in. Gideon hadn't just taken the company. He had taken Caleb's sense of identity. And now, he wanted to erase even the life Caleb had rebuilt. "I won't let him touch this family," Caleb said as they sat together at the kitchen table one evening. "Not now. Not ever." Evelyn nodded. "Then we fight together." But this time, with nothing between us. She returned to work part-time. easing back into her duties while splitting hours with the hospital's parenting support unit. She began hosting small gatherings for mothers with high-risk pregnancies, offering advice, sharing her journey, becoming a source of hope in a world too quick to overlook women like her. Maya joined the sessions occasionally, sometimes just to refill the coffee urn or hold someone's baby while they cried. One day, as Evelyn ended a talk about navigating uncertainty in relationships, Maya hugged her in the hallway. "You're changing lives," she said. "So are you," Evelyn replied. One evening, Caleb entered the NICU with a bundle of papers tucked under his arm. His smile was faint, but real. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. "A cease and desist. Gideon tried pushing another lawsuit, but our new lawyer just filed a countersuit based on fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. We found whistleblower testimony." Evelyn blinked. "From where?" "An old intern." Turns out, not everyone forgot what happened. She smiled, finally, genuine, full. "That's incredible." He leaned against the glass, looking at their daughters. "I don't want power," he said. "I just want peace, real peace, with you, with them." "You're getting there," she said. He looked at her, hopeful. "So are we." That night, as they walked home, hand in hand, Evelyn felt something inside her start to shift. Not an end to the pain, but a loosening of the knot in her chest. A slow beginning. She knew forgiveness wouldn't come in a single moment, and trust wouldn't be rebuilt with promises alone. But the truth, finally shared between them, had cleared the fog. Their love, flawed, fragile, and hard-won, was still alive. And that was enough to keep going. A month had passed since Caleb's full confession, and while their home remained modest, its atmosphere had transformed. Tension had not disappeared, but honesty had given it direction. Evelyn had resumed work in a limited capacity, while Caleb spent most of his time buried in legal files and digital evidence, preparing for what they both knew was inevitable. Then, on a Tuesday morning just after sunrise, the storm finally hit. Evelyn was wrapping bottles of breast milk for the NICU when the doorbell rang. Caleb opened it to find a courier holding a thick manila envelope and a clipboard. "Delivery for Mr. Thorne. Signature required." The second Caleb saw the sender's logo in the corner, Langston Group Legal Affairs. His pulse kicked. He signed, took the envelope, and closed the door quietly. When Evelyn entered the room, he was sitting at the kitchen table, unmoving, the unopened envelope clutched in both hands. "What is it?" she asked. He slid the document toward her. Gideon's opening move. She read the top page. Notice of intent to reclaim corporate authority and seek damages. Beneath it, legal jargon blurred into sharp accusations, unauthorized re-entry into proprietary networks, reactivation of company accounts, misuse of data archives. It was a calculated attack, aimed not just at Caleb's reclaimed influence, but at dismantling him completely. "He wants everything back," Caleb said flatly. "Even what he didn't build." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "This doesn't scare me." "It should," Caleb said, rubbing his temples. "Because he's not just coming after me. He's trying to humiliate us publicly." That evening, Caleb held an emergency video call with his attorney, a woman named Talia Kim, who had once worked on the team that drafted Caleb's original contracts. "He's bluffing," she said. "But the problem is, it's a dangerous bluff. He's counting on you backing down to avoid media fallout." "I'm not backing down," Caleb said. "But I won't drag my family through a circus either." Talia paused. "Then we beat him the only way he understands, by proving he doesn't own your legacy." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "What do you need?" "Everything. Emails, code repositories, proof you were the primary architect, personal logs, correspondence that shows his manipulation." Evelyn stepped into frame beside Caleb. "We have some of that," she said. "But we'll need more." Talia nodded. "Then get ready, because if you push back, he'll escalate." And escalate he did. The following week, Caleb's name began trending on tech forums and financial blogs. Some praised his sudden return. Others painted him as a rogue agent, a once gifted engineer who'd gone off-grid and now returned to stir trouble. Anonymous accounts began sharing distorted stories about Evelyn, too. Some claimed she was a gold digger. Others suggested she had lured Caleb back into the spotlight to restore his fortune. The worst headline read, "From shelter to Silicon, is Evelyn Hart just another corporate pawn?" Evelyn stared at the screen in disbelief. "I've done nothing but love you." "I know," Caleb said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And this is his way of punishing me for building something real." She turned to face him. Then let's show him it's stronger than his game. In the midst of legal chaos, Evelyn found her strength not in resistance, but in purpose. She intensified her work with the support group for mothers with premature infants. She began recording video testimonials for the hospital's parenting outreach platform, sharing her journey not as the wife of a man facing corporate warfare, but as a mother navigating uncertain terrain with resilience and grace. Her story resonated. Local stations picked it up. A few national platforms reached out for interviews. Though she declined most, one clip of her speaking to a group of expectant mothers went viral for its sincerity. "You don't need a perfect past to build a strong future," she said in the video. "You just need honesty, love, and the willingness to start again." Meanwhile, Caleb gathered every scrap of proof he could find: old backup drives, company memos, audio notes, and digital timestamps embedded deep in archived codebases. He called on former employees, even those who had once doubted him. One night, as Evelyn returned from the hospital, she found him pacing in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice hushed but urgent. "That memo proves he moved the assets without authorization." A pause. "No, I'm not asking you to go public. Just submit it privately to my legal team." He ended the call and turned to her. "We've got our cornerstone. One of the early systems engineers just confirmed that Gideon duplicated security certificates to push me out. It's buried, but it's there." Evelyn exhaled. "Then we're not just fighting shadows anymore." Maya visited more often during this period, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just with presents. One evening, she found Evelyn folding baby clothes and staring at her phone in silence. "You okay?" Maya asked. Evelyn nodded. "I'm just tired of proving I'm not a mistake in his life." "You're not a mistake. You're the reason he became the version of himself that could fight back." Evelyn looked up. "I just wish I could erase the noise." Maya handed her a warm cup of tea. "You can't erase it, but you can drown it in truth." The legal response Caleb's team filed 2 days later was crisp, powerful, and undeniable, with exhibits attached, including internal correspondence, verified authoring of proprietary code, and third-party testimonies. The document reasserted his foundational role in Thorn Dynamics. The final line of the statement read, "This is not about ego or fame. This is about integrity, legacy, and the right to reclaim what was stolen." The following week, Gideon's side responded with a strategic pivot. He launched a full media campaign, hiring influencers and tech analysts to shift the narrative. Yet this time, the tide had already started turning. An independent investigative report published by a respected journalist traced the timeline of Caleb's disappearance and detailed inconsistencies in Gideon's version of events. Public sympathy began to shift. Articles began surfacing with headlines like, "The Comeback of Caleb Thorne, a story of betrayal, loss, and redemption from homeless to hero, the quiet rebuild of a tech architect." At home, Evelyn noticed something different in Caleb. He no longer looked over his shoulder, no longer checked headlines first thing in the morning. His energy, though still serious, had softened. One night, he returned from a late call with Talia and found her sitting beside the girls' cribs. "They're stable now," she said, eyes glassy. "Doctors say they might come home in 2 weeks." Caleb knelt beside her, voice trembling. "Then we'll bring them home to something better than what we started with." She turned to him. "Not better, just honest." He smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "Honest is all I've got left. But it's enough." The apartment was dark when Evelyn returned that night. The only light came from the faint orange glow of a desk lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across the room. Caleb sat alone at the kitchen table, an untouched cup of tea in front of him, his laptop closed for the first time in weeks. He didn't hear her come in. His eyes were locked on nothing in particular, as if waiting for silence to say what words could not. Evelyn didn't announce herself. She quietly hung her coat, slipped off her shoes, and walked toward him. When she reached the edge of the table, she stopped. "You haven't slept," she said softly. He didn't answer. "I saw the draft statement your lawyer sent over. It's good, strong, everything you need it to be." Caleb's shoulders slumped slightly. "None of it feels like a win." Evelyn slid into the chair across from him. "Why not?" "Because somewhere along the way, I lost track of why I started fighting in the first place." She reached across the table, placing her hand gently over his. "Then remind me, why did you—" He looked at her, his voice a whisper. "To make sure you never had to carry the weight of my past. But I ended up making you carry the consequences anyway." Evelyn blinked back a sting of tears. "Do you remember the first time I brought you tea, in that diner?" The night you told me your name. I remember everything about that night, he replied. You were quiet, guarded, but there was this sadness in your eyes, and I remember thinking whoever hurt him did more than break his heart. They broke his belief in people. Caleb's jaw tightened. That's exactly what happened. She nodded. I didn't need you to be perfect, Caleb. I needed you to let me in, and I still do. He looked down. I know. There was a pause, one of those moments where both knew the next words would either close a chapter or begin a new one. Evelyn inhaled slowly. Tell me everything. Not just about the lawsuit, or Gideon. I want to know the man I married from the beginning. I want to see every room you've kept locked. Caleb sat back, his chest rising in a slow breath. Are you sure? I don't want to keep guessing, she said. I want to understand, even if it hurts. He stood, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the city lights twinkled like distant promises. He rested his palm against the cold glass. I started Thorn Dynamics in a garage I shared with 2 friends after college. We built our first server with parts we found in an old warehouse. We didn't even know if it would work. But I was obsessed with the idea of safety, online, financial, personal. I wanted to create a world where data couldn't be used to ruin someone's life. He turned slightly. Funny, right? That the very thing I built was used to destroy mine. Evelyn watched him quietly. Gideon was charming, brilliant. He could talk investors into anything. I was the builder. He was the voice. We were unstoppable, until the day I realized he had been using our technology to sell access to private information, tracking logs, behavioral data, entire user profiles, all off the record, all for profit. Her eyes widened. That's illegal. Caleb nodded. I documented everything, but before I could act, he forced a vote with the board. I had been so deep in coding that I didn't notice how much power I'd surrendered to him. They sided with him. I was cut out, legally, cleanly, and completely. He paused, turning back toward her. And I broke. I walked away with a small settlement, just enough to disappear. I couldn't face the shame, the press, the people who believed in me. Why didn't you fight then? Because I thought I'd lost who I was. I thought if I disappeared, the world would forget, and that maybe I'd forget too. Evelyn stood now, walking over to him. And did you? I tried. I slept on benches, picked up odd jobs, pretended I was no one. Then one night, in the cold, a woman handed me a sandwich and a smile. And for the first time in years, I wanted to be seen again. Her eyes welled. You found yourself in pieces, and you handed me only the ones you thought I could handle. I was wrong to do that, he said. But everything I gave you, every moment, was real. Even if the full picture was missing. She touched his cheek, then finished the picture. Not for Gideon, not for the courts, for us. He leaned into her palm. I will. They sat on the couch, side by side, as Caleb revealed everything. Old betrayals, the panic attacks he endured when headlines mentioned his name, the quiet months he spent volunteering at shelters under aliases, the guilt he carried for leaving behind a world he once loved. I thought disappearing would free me, he said, but all it did was turn me into a ghost. Evelyn gripped his hand tighter. Then come back, not as the CEO, not as the man everyone wants a piece of, but as you, the one I said yes to in a rainstorm, the one who fixed our faucet without being asked, the one who reads to our daughters even when they can't yet understand. He let out a quiet laugh, then wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. Do you think they'll forgive me someday? He asked. You've already given them something worth more than any empire, she said. A father who fought to become whole. They fell asleep that night wrapped in silence, not the fragile kind from weeks ago, but a deeper, warmer silence. The kind that wraps around you when words are no longer necessary. Outside, the world still spun with noise and headlines and allegations. But inside that small apartment, something had shifted. It wasn't resolution, not yet. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, it was enough. Hello, my beautiful family. Are you still watching? Are you still with me? We've all faced crossroads, times when love could either collapse or evolve. What would you have done if you were Evelyn? Stayed? Or walked away? If this part of the story moved you, tap the like button and tell us why. Your comment might be the one someone needs to read today. It began with a single email. Subject line, your time, your terms. It came from a board member Caleb hadn't spoken to in years, a former ally who had quietly stepped away during Gideon's rise to power. The message was brief but weighted. The truth has surfaced. The board is meeting in 72 hours. You're not just invited, you're needed. Caleb read the message 3 times before showing it to Evelyn. She looked at the screen, then at him. "This is it, isn't it?" He nodded. "It's the last door I never thought I'd open again." Evelyn placed her hand over his. "Then walk through it. But don't walk back into the man you left behind. Walk in as the one who came back stronger." The next 72 hours were relentless. Talia and her legal team prepped him for every question the board might ask. Evelyn helped assemble visual evidence, timelines, message threads, video testimony from former colleagues. Even Maya contributed, helping organize public support from their local community, amplifying the story of Caleb's quiet rebirth as a man who chose humility over vengeance. Meanwhile, tech media outlets began issuing quiet retractions. The original narrative had lost its legs. Journalists had begun uncovering inconsistencies in Gideon's claims. Whistleblower reports were gaining attention, and online sentiment had shifted drastically. People weren't just rooting for Caleb's return, they were demanding justice. The board meeting took place via secure video call, each member seated behind polished wood desks or in sterile glass offices. Caleb, by contrast, sat in his modest attic workspace, wearing a plain gray sweater, no branding, no flash, just focus. The chairperson, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes and a voice that held weight, opened the session. "We've reviewed all submitted material. Mr. Langston was given the opportunity to respond. He declined to participate directly but submitted a written rebuttal." Caleb kept his expression still. Talia presented a 20-minute summary of the evidence, documented breaches of governance, internal correspondence that showed Gideon bypassing protocol, and most importantly, digital logs with timestamps that proved Caleb's foundational authorship of the platform's original core architecture. When it was his turn to speak, Caleb didn't use slides. He simply looked into the camera. "I'm not here to reclaim a company so I can sit on a throne. I'm here to ensure that what we built with good intention is never used to manipulate or destroy again. I walked away once because I didn't know how to fight, but I've grown, I've suffered, and I've come back not to seek revenge, but to lead differently if you'll allow it." A hush followed. Then, one by one, the board members voted. 7 in favor, 2 abstained, none opposed. The chairperson concluded, effective immediately, Mr. Caleb Thorne is reinstated as founding executive with controlling interests restored. The board will initiate proceedings to remove Mr. Langston from all remaining positions. Caleb leaned back, his heart pounding, not with triumph, but with release. It was done. When he told Evelyn, she didn't say a word. She simply stepped forward and embraced him, holding him tightly in their small kitchen as evening sunlight poured in through the window. "You didn't just win," she whispered. "You transformed." But Caleb wasn't interested in resuming the past. Within days, he called for a press briefing, not at a luxury venue or private club, but at the same community center where he and Evelyn had once held their wedding. Standing at the podium in front of a humble backdrop, Caleb looked out at a modest audience of reporters, colleagues, and neighbors. "I once thought success meant innovation," he began. "Then I thought it meant wealth. But after losing everything, I discovered the only kind of success that matters is building something that heals people, systems, trust." He paused, taking a breath. "I'm not here to rewrite history. I'm here to use what I've learned to shape what's next. We will restructure Thorne Dynamics, not as a fortress, but as a bridge. We'll support young coders, empower small businesses with affordable security solutions, and reinvest in the communities that have too often been ignored." Evelyn stood nearby with their daughter's nurses. She watched as reporters lowered their cameras and simply listened. When he ended his speech with the words, "It's time to build with heart," the room rose in a quiet, unified applause. Within weeks, changes began to ripple outward. Caleb established a new foundation under the Thorne banner, one devoted to Educat Ion access, housing initiatives, and neonatal support. Evelyn, without hesitation, joined as Director of Healthcare Outreach. Her story, once a quiet survival of love and challenge, became a symbol of resilience for thousands of families navigating similar roads. They didn't chase headlines. They didn't need to. Instead, they focused on work, real work. At home, the triplets finally came home, tiny, still delicate, but strong enough to breathe without machines. Caleb installed baby monitors in every corner of their bedroom, watched the girls sleep with the quiet awe of a man who once thought he'd never deserve a family. Evelyn's days were filled with diaper changes, feedings, and fielding questions from nurses and social workers eager to replicate her outreach programs. Her nights, though often sleepless, were filled with warmth, purpose, and a sense of completion she had never known. One evening, weeks after the board vote, Maya dropped by with a bottle of sparkling juice and a wide grin. To the woman who never stopped believing, she said, clinking glasses with Evelyn. To the man who finally told the truth, Evelyn replied, handing a glass to Caleb. They all laughed, tired, grateful, deeply changed. Does it feel real now? Maya asked, leaning against the counter. Caleb looked over at Evelyn, then at the 3 bassinets aligned near the window. It feels earned, he said. Public recognition followed, but Caleb kept his presence limited. He declined television interviews, politely refused magazine spreads, and insisted on redirecting media attention toward Evelyn's maternal health initiative instead. If you really want to write a story, he told one reporter, write about the women who don't get second chances. Write about the children who never got their first. Then came a moment Caleb hadn't expected. He received an invitation to deliver a keynote address at an international conference on digital ethics, a stage he once ruled, now offered back to him under different terms. He considered it for days. It was Evelyn who finally said, "Go, but go as you." He did. And when he stood before the crowd, thousands of eyes fixed on him, he wore no suit, no tie, just a dark button-up and a calm voice. And instead of talking about code or strategy, he spoke of transparency, redemption, and the power of starting again without shame. By the time they returned home that weekend, the house was lit with the soft hum of lullabies. Evelyn placed the girls into their crib, watching their tiny chests rise and fall with steady rhythm. Caleb walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked. "For saving the version of me worth keeping." She leaned back into him. "You did that yourself. I just held the light." They stood there in silence, surrounded by the sound of new life and restored hope. Outside, the city glowed softly, no longer a battlefield, but a witness to the quiet revolution they had fought together. And inside their modest home, the future had never felt more possible. The winter sun was just beginning to melt the frost off the garden wall when Evelyn stepped barefoot onto the porch, a cup of herbal tea warming her hands. The backyard had transformed over the last few months into something that resembled a dream she once dared not speak aloud, a soft green haven where laughter echoed and new life took its first steps. Inside, the triplets were asleep in their playpen, tangled in blankets, cheeks rosy, breath slow and peaceful. Caleb had spent the morning assembling their new learning station, which stood beside the kitchen like a miniature lab. He had added sensory tools, audio modules, and a touch panel he programmed himself. Not because they needed advanced tech, but because their father knew what it meant to build the future with your own hands. Evelyn took another sip and closed her eyes. The chaos was behind them now, not erased, but accepted, folded into memory like an old letter kept not for the pain it once delivered, but for the healing it led to. The home they now lived in wasn't grand, but it carried the fingerprint of every decision made together. The windows were wide, filling the rooms with natural light. The nursery overlooked a line of cherry blossom trees that bloomed like confetti in spring. The walls were painted in soft tones Evelyn had picked out herself, colors that whispered calmness rather than announced luxury. They had chosen not to move into anything flashy, even though they could afford to. Caleb had been clear. "I want our children to grow up knowing joy doesn't need a spotlight," he'd said. So they built a life out of intention, not image. Their kitchen island doubled as a workbench. A bulletin board in the hallway displayed family photos beside sketches from Caleb's new research initiative and flyers for Evelyn's outreach programs. And in the living room beside the soft cream sofa sat a small wooden table that once served as their dining space in the attic apartment, refinished and now holding a vase of fresh peonies. Evelyn returned inside and paused at the sight of Caleb seated on the floor, one of the girls curled up against his chest, humming to the rhythm of his heartbeat. He looked up and smiled, not the polished public version of himself, but the quiet one, the one she had met beneath a rain-soaked awning with a borrowed blanket and a half-spoken name. "How long has she been out?" Evelyn asked, kneeling beside them. "Since my 4th attempt at the alphabet song," he whispered. She chuckled. "I should have recorded that." "You didn't miss much," he replied. "I forgot Q. She'll forgive you." "Hope so," he said, brushing a kiss across the baby's temple. Evelyn tucked the blanket tighter around them, then leaned into his side. "I've been thinking," she began. Caleb tilted his head. About how far we've come, about how fragile it all was, and how somehow we held on." He nodded, his voice low. "It didn't feel like holding on. It felt like falling through most of it. But we landed," she said. Not perfectly, but fully. He wrapped his free arm around her. And that's all I ever wanted. Later that afternoon, while the babies napped, they sat in the sunroom reviewing proposals. Caleb had received multiple offers to license one of his security tools to international agencies. But he was selective, only entertaining those that aligned with ethical use and equitable access. One offer in particular caught his attention, an open-source project aimed at digital protections for refugee aid groups. They're underfunded, Caleb said, but their work is saving lives. I could reinforce their systems for half what I used to charge a bank. Then do it, Evelyn said. That's the man you've become. That's the legacy worth leaving. He smiled at her across the table. You always make me better. No, she replied. I just remind you who you were before the world tried to make you forget. That evening, they hosted a small gathering in the backyard. Just a few friends from the hospital, some volunteers from the shelter, Maya, and 2 board members who had stood by Caleb when it mattered most. Fairy lights hung between the trees, and a portable speaker played soft acoustic music. The girls, dressed in matching pastel rompers, passed from lap to lap with coos and laughter. Maya lifted her glass midway through the night. To the woman who gave love its full voice, she said, looking at Evelyn, and to the man who chose truth, even when it cost him comfort. Everyone raised their glasses. To rebuilding, said one of the nurses. To rebirth, added another, and Caleb said quietly, to the kind of success that doesn't shine, it shelters. As the night drew to a close, Evelyn sat on the garden bench beneath the stars. Caleb joined her, sliding his hand into hers. They're asleep, he said. All 3, miraculously. We should be asleep too, but then we'd miss this, he said, gesturing to the quiet evening sky. They sat there for a while, saying nothing, letting the silence affirm what words no longer needed to. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn's maternal network expanded. Her workshops reached hundreds of women across different cities. She taught not just about infant care and wellness, but about partnership, courage, and navigating uncertainty with clarity. Her words were raw, honest, and never delivered from a pedestal. Caleb accompanied her sometimes, offering tech support and emotional presence. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was with purpose. At one session, a young woman stood during Q&A and asked Evelyn how she found the strength to forgive a man who'd hidden so much. Evelyn looked at her and said, because he never stopped fighting to be the man I saw in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. That moment was recorded, clipped, and widely shared across platforms. But it wasn't viral fame that moved them. It was the handwritten letter they received a week later from a mother in Maine who said, your story saved my marriage. It reminded me that truth doesn't end love, it tests it, and sometimes it makes it stronger. On the triplets' first birthday, they threw a quiet celebration at the community center, the same place they had exchanged vows years earlier. Evelyn decorated the space with soft peach banners and baby photos from month 1 to month 12. Caleb brought a cake shaped like a computer monitor, just for fun. Friends gathered. Laughter filled the room. Gifts were simple, mostly books, art supplies, and hand-knit blankets. When it came time for speeches, Caleb held the microphone, his daughters crawling at his feet. I spent years building programs designed to protect what matters, he said. But the real firewall? It's here. This family. This community. You protected me when I forgot how to protect myself. He paused, locking eyes with Evelyn. And to my wife, thank you for building a home where the past didn't have to be perfect, only honest. Applause followed, soft and warm. That night, long after the guests had left and the dishes had been cleared, Caleb and Evelyn stood at the window, arms wrapped around each other, watching the city wind down. Do you think they'll remember any of this? Evelyn asked, nodding toward the nursery. They won't remember the cake or the lights, he said. But they'll grow up feeling what we fought for. That kind of memory doesn't fade. And what about us? She asked. We'll keep writing it, he replied, day by day, truth by truth. She rested her head on his shoulder. Then let's never stop. Caleb and Evelyn's story reminds us that truth doesn't destroy love, it refines it. Have you ever experienced that kind of transformation? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story touched you, subscribe to Love and Twilights for more true-to-heart narratives. Turn on the bell so you never miss a moment of love, loss, and everything in between.